Average is not invited. Not if you're holding your company off-site in Las Vegas. We aren't on friendly terms with the bare minimum, and unenthusiastic is uninvited. Las Vegas's creative energy and world-class hospitality want to bring your company off-site to crazy new heights. That's why fear-based leadership is afraid of Vegas, and boring won't be there, but it will be watching the meeting recordings later. Plan for the extraordinary at vegasmeansbusiness.com.
Ma, ¿podemos llevar a Javi a su casa?
Claro.
¿Podemos llevar también a los gemelos, señora Delgado?
¿Y por qué no?
¿Y a Noah, señor Delgado?
Seguro.
How about Ignacio, Mrs. Delgado?
Obvio. Entre más mejor. Pero los botines sucios y los balones de fútbol los ponen atrás.
Yeah, no problem. We got it.
Vive a lo grande, con asientos para tus hijos y los amigos de tus hijos. En la primera Grand Highlander.
For exclusive podcasts and more, sign up at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, someone was targeting men in New York City gay bars, killing and dismembering them. Why did it take police so long to find the culprit? We'll discuss the HBO original series, Last Call. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of the These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Mr. Deadarm, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Kevin.
Why are you calling me that?
Because you literally can't move your left arm right now.
So
What happened?
Well, I've had some pain like in my shoulder. That's like when I move my arm a certain way, it hurts. And so I went to the ortho and they figured I've got, something going on with my rotator cuff. So we can give you a shot that will probably help and put it in your... Okay. So they put the big needle in between in the joint between the bone and the whatever. And so you'll start feeling good. In the meantime, my whole arm hurts from the shoulder right down.
He can't move it.
I can't move it at all. When I move it, even just...
He had to take off his watch because it was too heavy.
I'm trying to bring my arm up to the camera and I'm picking it up with my other hand. And just doing this hurts so much.
By the way, if this were me this happened to, Kevin at some point would accidentally be like, nice job, boom. Like every single time something on me is hurt, he accidentally
Why does no one believe men's pain?
Enthusiastically punches me in that area.
No one believes men's pain.
I messed up my rotator cuff and I went in to the physical therapist. Uh-huh. I did 6 things and it was the lamest, can you lift this 10-pound weight and do this and do that? And I was like, what should I be doing in between? They're like, oh, you don't have to do anything. And I did these 6 times. I didn't break a sweat any of the times. And then it was fine. It's never hurt me again.
But how did that impact your toenail, Toby?
It didn't impact my toenail. There's no physical therapy for toenails.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of The Final Curtain, Laura Bricker. Hey, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca. And we have Australian listeners coming to Exeter to buy The Final Curtain, and that is just freaking amazing. So
wow.
Very exciting.
Yeah. I have to give a shout out to our listener, Shannon Sinclair, who is now coming back to Exeter for a second time on her New England, U.S. journey just to come to Exeter, back to Water Street Bookstore and have a cup of coffee. So thank you so much, Shannon, for coming to visit.
That is quite the expensive cup of coffee.
Didn't she swing by the bookstore and you weren't there?
She did. And Steph at the bookstore was like, yeah, I told her if you just hang out for a little, she was tempted to say if you hang out for a little bit, she might just drop in because her office is next door, but I didn't. So then I felt a little guilty. I was like, I need to hook up because Australia to Exeter is pretty cool.
You wouldn't want to come all that way and then miss it. Miss Laura Bricker.
You got to see Dan with the good hair, who recently was Dan with the wet hair because he was a really good sport and went in the dunk tank at our little police department carnival thing. But he's since rebounded.
Wow.
Yeah.
And finally,
Toby Ball.
I literally did a costume change just now. Our captain of all things cynical, the author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Strange Arrivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Hello, Rebecca.
Toby, can you move your arm? All right.
I can move them up and down, sideways, the whole bit.
Oh, both of them, too.
Toby, when you're injured, does someone in your house like enthusiastically punch you in your injury?
Come on.
Only if I admit to being injured.
That has happened like 2 or 3 times and always by accident.
It happens every time.
Not every time. No.
Including the time I broke my leg and I came home from the emergency room and this is the first time I'd ever used crutches. And Kevin's like, here, let me help you into the house. And they had not yet put a cast on my leg yet because they're like, you have to go to the orthopedist like in 2 days. And they just wrapped it with some gauze. And I'm literally walking into the house in stupid crutches and a broken leg. And Kevin slammed the front fucking door on my broken goddamn leg. And he still thinks it's funny.
It's a comedy of errors.
I literally felt tears fly out of my face at a 90-degree angle, like a cartoon. Anyway, Kevin, this is obviously Monday's brand new episode of Crime Writers On.
Probably our last.
What is happening on our next program?
Well, on Thursday, we've got another CWO classic. We're going to be going back to our review of Catch and Kill.
Catch and Kill.
Then on Monday, we're going to be talking about the new podcast from Texas Monthly. It's called Stephenville.
Stephenville. All right. We have a lot coming up. Isn't Catch and Kill like the most meta thing that ever happened, right? It was like a podcast about a book that already had been made into like a TV thing or something like that.
I think it was a TV show, which was...
It was a
TV
book.
series that was made from the podcast.
It was the podcast about the Ronan Farrow book.
Yes. Yeah, I loved it. I loved everything about it. All right.
Yeah, Ronan Farrow squeezed every drop out of that lemon.
Yes.
Good for him. And then it became the HBO, then it became the series too on HBO.
Yeah.
And then
Ronan.
Next it's a musical on Broadway.
I hope not.
I would go to see that.
Little Ronan shutting his curtains, like waiting away from Black Cube, like chasing him down the street.
Catch and kill, catch and kill.
All right.
All you ever do is catch and kill.
Have we wasted enough time? Should we just get to what we're going to talk about?
Yeah.
Okay, let's
dig
get
into it, Rebecca.
All right, let's lead off. Let's change the tone, shall we?
A serial murderer was on the loose. Something made him hate gay people. That fear, it's in all of us, of being hurt because we're queer.
In 1992, authorities were slow to make connections between separate murders. A pair of affluent, closeted men disappeared after leaving New York City gay bars. Their dismembered bodies later discovered in New Jersey and Pennsylvania.
Our victim was cut into 7 pieces and were packaged in several different trash bags.
As more men were killed, gay activists tried to sound the alarm that someone was stalking club-goers. But New York police were indifferent to the crimes and hostile to the queer community. The culprit, known as the Last Call Killer, escaped detection for a decade until new technology gave the detectives the clues to his identity.
I can't put it into words. The suspect was here in Maine, and his card's in the system from 1973.
The HBO original series, Last Call, when a serial killer stalked queer New York, recounts the crime spree that shook the community. Based on the Edgar-winning book by Elon Greene, the series also dives into the lives of the victims, the challenges for investigators, and the cultural issues of the day. Spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about plot points from Last Call, so if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. And one note, we are actually friends with Elon Greene, and he's a friend of the program, but that has not influenced our review either way. Right?
Well, we'll find out, won't we?
Right. Because I was texting him as I was watching it, and I was giving him some things that I thought were interesting, and I was like, what did you think about that?
Okay. I guess
it's too late to fix that.
Okay. Well, one note that you all made, and I'd love for you all to weigh in on this, and I'll start with you, Toby, is that this is a particularly victim-centric look at this crime. Is it not?
Yeah. I mean, I think it follows the book in a lot of ways in that, you know, the killer, like, you don't even really know who he is until the third episode or maybe the very end of the second. So what you're really doing is following, like, there's some stuff about the investigation, but there's a lot about the lives that these men lived. You know, all their lives ended in late 80s, early 90s. But what it was like to be gay in New York and these other places where they were from. And then also what was going on in the gay community, particularly in New York. And I'm sure we'll talk about this, but sort of the sort of virulent homophobia that was both in the public and then also within the police department. So, I mean, I think that that's the real strength, right? Is these sort of biographies of these men and their lives. And I think there's like an interesting part where they're talking to a woman who is sort of anti-violence against LGBTQ people organizer. And she's asked about the name of, they say, and that was, so-and-so, right? And she says, I don't even remember it because that's not important. What's important are the victims. And that sort of seems to me like almost like the thesis statement for this whole show is that what was important was the victims' lives and how they lived and things like that. And that sort of their commonality is that they were murdered by this one guy, but that's not sort of what defines them.
I also like that you call it victim-centric because that's how I felt. I thought the story itself was very well told, and I like how they took time with each victim, but also sort of the manner in which they did it. It felt like it was very affectionate testimonials, but not saccharine. It's not the lit up the room or whatever. I think there were complexities to their lives and to the way that these people, their relationships with the people who were speaking, and they let that be there. But they also sort of paced in such a way that it really breathed, so it really took that element on in a very sober way. And I think that's, it helped form the tone of the entire series.
I think it was interesting, Laura, because this is a time where people were closeted, right? And so they're sourcing here, including the first victim who was not out and, he was married and had kids. And it was interesting to get, the sourcing of people who were close to these victims who could talk now in retrospect about their relationships with them. And that's not easy to do because they're sort of everywhere and all over the place and they're revisiting this time and place and, talking about people that they didn't necessarily even know were gay at the time. In some cases they did, obviously, and in some cases they didn't. In some cases they knew they were having relationships with somebody who was closeted. So it's a complex situation, but it was just extremely sensitively done, I thought.
Yeah, it really was. And I think when you were talking about this being victim-centric, before we get into how sensitively it was done, I think what I really appreciated about that was that at the time that this happened, there wasn't a culture where it was conducive to sharing the lives of these men who were victims in this case. So this really gave their family and friends an opportunity, as it did in the book, to share what they loved about them and what they remembered about them and do it in a way that was very thorough and compassionate and loving. And, I think that couple that you were talking about, Rebecca, that was like one of my favorite parts because he's like, they were friends and whatever. And the one guy was like, had never been with a man. He's like, and then we had a little hanky-panky.
It was quite a romance because we were so close and we were so intimate. We fit together and we were safe together. It's trust. We trusted each other. Obviously, this relationship could not see the light of day or we would both be in serious trouble.
But I think even after that, you hear about how they have this connection, they have this relationship, but it's still secret for so long. And so when these crimes are happening, you also have the flip side, which are the friends and family of these people can mourn their death, but the people that are their romantic partners, maybe not out themselves, aren't really able to fully come out and mourn and grieve these people that have been so brutally murdered. Do you know what I mean?
Laura, I can't believe you didn't mention the nose hair on that one guy. It just was out of control.
That's not important, Kevin.
Well, I mean, those are things that do distract me, Kevin. You know how my brain works. Yes. I'll be like, oh, I can't look at that nose hair. I can't look at that nose hair mode. No.
Well, it's interesting because there are details in this case that have distracted me too. One of them, and I actually talked to Elon about this when I interviewed him about this book in Exeter, is the hot dog vendor who discovered the body in the dumpster the day that he went to open the hot dog truck. And he wanted the police to like get the investigation out of the way so he could just open his hot dog truck. And I'm like, dude, you just found a head and a body. It's the most New York like
Also,
thing
your
ever.
hot dog truck is on wheels.
Yes. But he's like so, and it's like, you really think people are going to be so excited to like eat hot dogs like 10 feet away from where
body parts were found?
He was so, in the book, there's this whole scene where he's just so annoyed at this crime scene being so close to his truck. And I'm like, it's just the most New York thing ever to just be so just like not compassionate about this situation.
It's also like a criminal thing. It's like when you think about like people that are like police and medical examiners and you would like see somebody that's like eating while they're doing an autopsy and you're like,
yeah, but he wasn't that. He was a guy selling the hot dogs.
He's got a job to do.
I know.
I thought it was interesting to see these people having read the book. And so it's a lot of the same people that are in the book are in the show. And it was kind of interesting to see like the cops are exactly who you imagine they were.
Yes.
When you read the book.
Well, let's talk about I want to talk about the cops, not the New York City cops, the other cops, the Jersey and Pennsylvania cops, because they are in the spectrum of the investigation, the quote, better ones, right? I mean, they actually did some investigating and the New York City cops did basically none, yet they're not perfect investigators and perfect, quote, characters in this in any way, right, Toby?
Yeah, well, there's that one who said like he got off, I don't know if he like took a bus into Port Authority or something. He says he got off and he saw all this stuff going on. I was like, I'm never going back there. Yeah, I mean, it's, one of the things that kind of runs through this is like at best, they're uncomfortable investigating crimes in sort of the gay community. And at worst, their homophobia is like a real impediment to doing that. And it's kind of, there's some subtle things that are in there.
There's also some not subtle things.
And there's also some not subtle things. Like there's like this crazy interview they have where at the end they're like, oh, you got any questions? He's like, why are you guys emphasizing the gay thing?
At that time, we didn't know it was a gay bar. I don't know anything about where all the gay bars in New York are. I don't know about anything about the community because it really is irrelevant. I mean, we don't. All we know is we got a body and we got to find out who would do it, but it's not really relevant to anything.
And then another guy says that he was the cops are at a disadvantage because the gay community was quote unquote not their home turf. You see some notes where I'm not going to use the term, but it's blank bar describing these gay bars that they're going to they have to go to try and gather evidence and stuff. So it's maddening, right? I mean, it really is. If you're trying to look for ways to cut the cops slack, they don't really give you much to work with because it's just pure sort of bigotry. And they can either kind of fight it a little bit or not at all, but it definitely affects the investigation.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Toby, what I make of the older cops either. I mean, we need to have a separate discussion about the NYPD and those guys, but these guys, I mean, they don't strike me as metropolitan cops, so their professional exposure to the gay community was probably limited. Personally, I'm assuming very limited. But they also had that one guy who was talking about it, and he felt like if he said the wrong thing in the wrong way about a gay person, that he would be called a bigot. So I think he's also kind of like, he understands that there's something, like he doesn't know how to navigate it, so it's very inelegant. But I think that at least he kind of recognizes that his experiences are of a different time, whereas the other guys, well, what's the gay thing all about? I mean, it's one thing when they're saying like, oh, it didn't matter that they were gay, we're going in, we're going to do the investigation. And you're right, their sexual identity shouldn't be a consideration in whether you do the investigation. But if you don't see their sexual orientation, then you're missing a part of who they are, which is also a part of who the criminal is and why they're victims and everything like that. So it's one thing to, say, oh no, I'm a really great guy because I don't see any of that. That's not what we're hoping for. We're glad that you're, agnostic about how much effort you're going to put into the crime, but by not acknowledging and not trying to see that's what their experience is, not only are you doing them personally a disservice, you're doing your investigation a disservice.
Well, it's like being a member of any community and saying you're, quote, colorblind, or saying, I don't care if you're black, white, green, red, or purple. And you're like, nobody is green, red, or purple. You're actually just like being really racist when you say that kind of shit.
Yeah, you're just dismissing it.
Exactly. Yeah, not cool.
The reality is, if that's the commonality among the victims, like, you have to take that into account, right? I mean, you're not being like super progressive by saying, I don't even know. That's like a clue. Like, that's part of what ties people together, and you can't ignore it. So,
yeah, I mean, there are people who are libertarian, and there are people who are straight up capitalists, like capitalists who want you to spend money on Patreon.
Oh, yes, just like those.
Because those...
That's what they all have in common, all the people on our Patreon.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm a capitalist.
Yes.
I'm a capitalist.
Yes.
I believe in, the free market.
This ain't a nonprofit here. No. We got to eat.
We got to eat, which is why we're like, hey, we're going to put this discussion aside and talk about our business section.
Yes.
You can go to patreon.com/partners in crime media and join our Patreon. And again, full disclosure, executive producer from this documentary, Elon Greene, is a patron. And so...
Or he was.
He was. And by the way, I'll just say that when I picked this, I assumed this was on his book, but I didn't 100% know.
You know why you should have assumed that? Because when we met him, he said there was a documentary being made about his book, and he was working.
No, I wasn't. I actually haven't met him. Everybody else did. I had baseball.
Oh, you weren't there.
Anyway... That's the way things go. What will you get if you join us on Patreon? Well, this week we have the new Crime Writers on the After Show. Rebecca and I have 2 great stories from our vacation. One is disgusting, and the other is a miracle. It's miraculous.
With the disgusting one it's murder adjacent.
Well, according to you, yes.
It is.
All right.
Serial killer adjacent.
Serial killer adjacent.
Yes.
We also have Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. On the last deep dive, Toby talked about The Stranger Beside Me, which is the Ann Rule's Ted Bundy book. And your guests all kind of said, this was kind of showing its age, right?
Yeah, I think it does. It's super long, and like a lot of sort of the stereotypes, the wrong stereotypes we have about serial killers. I don't know if you can trace it right back to this book, but she certainly like pushes the serial killers are geniuses and they're super charming and good looking and stuff. That kind of is in this book. There's some other stuff about like bite mark evidence and stuff like that. So anyway, it kind of moves along. It's really, really long. It has like an insane number of epilogues because they kept updating the editions. Yeah. And so you get these long things. There's one after another, and you just feel like it's never going to end. But that being said, I mean, the rest of the book, I mean, it goes down pretty easily. The story's interesting, but it definitely is a product of its time.
You're basically describing the better flavor of NyQuil right now. It's like the red NyQuil. Like, it's not as bad as it could be. It goes down pretty easy, but it's a product of its time.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a reason why it's like zillion seller and a classic. Is that the main part of the book kind of moves along, and you can kind of forgive it for it's being written when it was. And then you just get to these endless like afterwards, and you just like it just makes it not worth it. Now if you're a deep dive member on Patreon, you get to watch Toby record his next podcast live on Crowdcast. You can even jump in the chats and contribute. And the book that they're doing this time is called In the Mouth of the Wolf.
Oh,
and tell us about your very sexy panel.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome, actually. The book is about a sort of pioneering, sort of crusading Mexican journalist who was murdered about 10 years ago. And it's just a lot about Mexican journalism and the dangers that they practice under and the corruption in Mexico and stuff. And I've got a great journalist panel. We've got Simone Paget, who writes a sex and relationship column for the Toronto Globe and Mail. We have Meg Heckman, who teaches journalism at Northeastern University in Boston. And then we have Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Maggie Freeling.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's one good-looking panel, Toby.
Also a journalism instructor.
Yeah.
Also, I'm really excited to hear what they have to say about this because they've got 100% the perspectives to talk about this story. And the story itself is just, it's crazy.
And I have an update because I was supposed to have a Leave It to Bricker this week after my great cattle roundup. However, the cattle roundup has been continued for 2 weeks because they were getting a load of hay, which has only given me more time to source my perfect cattle roundup outfit. So stay tuned.
You can tell that Laura's working in the criminal legal system again because she says her cattle roundup has been continued and not postponed.
It is continued to the next.
Yes, it's been filed.
There's been a continuance filed in the cattle roundup, but don't worry. And I was told my enthusiasm might be construed as aggression, but I don't care. I'm so enthusiastic. I'm ready for the cattle roundup.
Wow. Get along, little doggy. Okay. I
have a theme song.
Yes.
That's what the men on the dating app say. Your enthusiasm is construed as aggression.
It's a little aggressive. Get used to it. This is Laura Bricker, people.
Also, if you tune in to These Are the Stories, the Law & Order podcast, we've got a great double episode that we're talking about, this two-parter from season 17 of SVU. This is the one where you have the serial killer who's in jail, and he helps him point to the killer of a bunch of crimes who is also the serial killer who's the medical examiner. Have a listen.
Dr. Carl Rudnick, Deputy Chief Medical Examiner in the Borough of Manhattan. He's a serial killer.
Wait, Carl became an ME? Oh no, that really is. That is perfect. He never liked people.
It's based on so many things.
My goodness, there's Long Island serial killer, there's Robert Durst, there's all sorts of funky stuff. It was a lot of fun to talk about.
There's a sex trailer.
Sex trailer. Our guest was Lauren Vandermeer from the Drinks with Death podcast.
It was really fun to tape. All right, so Kevin, before we end the business section, do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Our Patreon patron saints are Jill Crosby and Allison Wormers.
Jill.
Bless you.
Bless you. Allison, bless you. Thanks for joining our Patreon. Thanks to everybody who's over there. Thanks to everybody who isn't and just listens to the business section anyway. We love all of you, but really consider joining our Patreon. It's super fun back there. Kevin, is us on the business section?
Thus ends the business section.
I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now.
Do you ever meet someone who seems kind of off? Whether it's a creepy neighbor or a random phone number that keeps calling you, Truthfinder has you covered. You can search for people by name, address, phone number, email, and more. Truthfinder can be especially helpful for running confidential background checks on anyone you're planning to meet from online dating apps. Go to truthfinder.com/podcasts for a special offer. That's truthfinder.com/podcasts to access your special offer today.
Experience a different tomorrow with Norwegian Cruise Line. Book today and get 50% off your cruise to Alaska, Europe, and beyond. Plus, everyone can enjoy their vacation with free unlimited open bar, free specialty dining, and more. Visit ncl.com, call your travel advisor, or 1-888-NCL-CRUISE. Offer ends soon. Norwegian Cruise Line. Ships registry the Bahamas and USA. Restrictions apply.
The rest of my life gon' start today.
Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
So, Laura, speaking of victims, one of the victims that you made a special note about was Anthony Marrero, right?
Yeah.
Because he definitely gets, I think, a nice bit of time in the documentary and should.
Yeah, and I think what I thought was really interesting about his story is that, we have these other men, privileged, white, closeted gay men. And then we have Anthony Marrero, who's a Puerto Rican sex worker. And we see a different side to the gay community in New York through his story. We have his brother who is still struggling with this part of his life. We have a friend who talks about him. We have the nephew who's also coming out in his own way. and relating to this story. And I think for me, this is somebody that to me was marginalized twice, because of their work as a sex worker, because of their background, and because of their sexual orientation. So to have that person included in this, to me, was almost more heartbreaking than some of the other stories, just because of who he was and how he died, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And Toby, like another thing that we should point out that is in addition to, looking at, the different victims here, you sort of pointed out too that there are also multiple villains in the documentary, aside from the killer himself.
Right. Well, there's a killer, there's homophobia as a thing, both sort of within the public and within the police departments, which I think they do a really good job with, sort of placing what happened in time and sort of what the attitudes were at the time. And then you have Anita fucking Bryant, who, I mean, what the hell? It's so weird.
But don't you feel like you can draw a through line from Anita Bryant's rhetoric to the rhetoric today, the anti-gay rhetoric and bills being passed, and very,
to do it.
I mean, it's
in the documentary.
It's the same. I mean, it's the same, exactly the same talking points, and it's Anita Bryant all over again.
Yeah, it's Anita Bryant all over again. Now they're going after kids too.
Yep.
I mean, that didn't seem to be a big thing there, but going after trans children. I mean, it's back, right? It's back, and it's virulent again, and some of the way things are being framed is slightly different, but it's no less vicious with, accusations of being groomers and people protesting drag story times. It's really, it's not good. And it comes from a certain political viewpoint. It needs to be called out more than it is. I think the media does a terrible job of like kind of putting it forward. Like, well, here's what one side says. And this other side says, it's like, no, it's just pure fucking unadulterated bigotry.
Right. It's not culture wars.
It's going after.
It's not culture wars. It's not culture wars. It's discrimination and bigotry. And it's unbelievable that it's become a political talking point that is just widely accepted by the masses.
And in many cases, going after like the most vulnerable, trans kids. That's about as vulnerable a population as you can describe. And they're being vilified. So anyway, off my soapbox, but it's not hard to draw conclusions today based on what you see here.
I really appreciated the point that they made about even like the name of the killer, and they call him the last call killer, which I thought was, it's very creative and whatever, but it was born out of this dismissal, actually this antipathy towards the gay community by some columnist, that it was
Post,
more like I'm calling him this guy, the last call killer, because trying to sort of draw a line to like, oh no, this was everybody at the end of the night and they're all promiscuous and this is what you get for going home with the last wallflower or whatever. And it's
what you get for staying out late at bars and drinking and being gay.
Yeah.
And while as a writer, I can certainly appreciate a very clever moniker as much as the next guy. I was like, oh, okay. I understand why not everybody embraces this as the way to refer to the killer.
Right. Well, no, I don't think serial killers should ever have monikers. I always think it's gross when unless it's like related to a place, because like that's where it happens.
The Long Island serial killer.
Yeah, the Gilgo. It's like that's a place. That's where it happened. Cool. But like if it's ever something that tries to be a brand, gross. Just don't do it. If you're out there, you're ever tempted to like name a killer something for fun, don't do it. It's gross.
But Laura, you and I are never going to apologize for the story about the guy who was breaking into women's apartments and then cutting their clothes off with scissors, and how they called him Jack the Snipper.
Jack the Snipper. Oh yeah, Jeffrey Gelinas in Durham. Mm-hmm. I remember that case very well. He and then every time he kept getting out, he kept doing it again.
Yeah. All right, should we get back on topic?
Oh, sure.
Oh, wait. Can we talk about why I also watched The Golden Girls, and I'm not a closeted gay man. We don't have to be old and closeted gay to watch The Golden Girls. Can we talk about that?
But it doesn't hurt.
Well, I love how they like go into that guy. So when we get Richard Rogers, who's this nurse that ends up being the last call killer, you have the police like searching his apartment, and you see these videotapes of him like, there's all these Golden Girls episodes, and we're like, what's this show for old people? Like, he must be gay. And I'm like, seriously? Like, I want to live, like, my friends and I have already decided that we are going to be living in a Golden Girls house someday. So, and we're not gay. We just want to live in a Golden Girls house. So you can come visit.
Were the Golden Girls gay?
No, but they're
promiscuous.
No, but they are sort of like, they're held up by the gay community. They're sort of like gay icons, even though they're not gay. In the same way that like Dolly Parton is, in the same way that like Barbra Streisand is, and like the Golden Girls are sort of like part of the iconography.
Or like Liberace.
Yeah. Well, Liberace was gay.
I'm joking.
That was very funny. Very funny joke.
Last week we had one of our rewind was Missing Richard Simmons.
Yeah.
The one time we talked with Dan Taberski on These Are the Stories, somehow it came up that he like watched all of the Golden Girls.
Yeah.
Like he's a super Golden Girls fan.
It's an incredible show. It totally holds up, by the way. 100% holds up.
Except for the fact when you find out they were all like 55 years old.
Oh,
like,
like
oh
my age.
God.
Like Estelle Getty was like my age when she was in that freaking wig. It was ridiculous. Anyway.
I hate being the same age as all these old people.
Was that the one that Delta Burke was on?
No, that was Designing Women, which also, by the way, kind of holds up these days.
I watch the Golden Girls a lot at night. It helps me fall asleep. It's very soothing.
Okay. What other notes do we have here that we have to talk about? All right.
I liked the bartender lady.
Oh my God, the bartender lady was incredible.
Okay. Are you filming us now? Are you going to let me see what I look like? Oh, I can see it now, but God, I look huge.
No, you don't. You look amazing. You look amazing.
This is a really long time ago. And her recall of like specific nights, specific songs that were sung, Michael's place at the bar, it's really unbelievable. And her self-consciousness looking at the camera at herself when she looks exactly the frickin' same as she did 20 years ago. It was pretty unbelievable to me. And Kevin, there were some details in the film that you enjoyed as well.
Yeah, that great footnote about how they were going to surveil the killer, but they ended up making a quick collar because he was working at the same hospital where Rudy Giuliani's mother was. Like, oh, you wouldn't want Giuliani's mother to get ganked by the last call killer.
Yeah, I'm sure.
By the goose ganker? No, I'm kidding.
Goose ganker,
yeah. She was right in the killer's demographic.
Yeah, everyone's like, that was not his profile.
Yeah.
Even the FBI profilers could tell you that. But, can I say one thing, though, about like how this wraps up? I just feel like this suffers from, an all true crime. And I'll say, my books included, that like it always just kind of loses steam when you get to the arrest and the trial. Because even though the legal case continues, the narrative is really up because the story here is about who is the killer. And then we find out. And then you've got another hour of falling action, because in a lot of cases, what happens in trials, you're just recapping the story that you already told. So unless you've got other things there. Now, I will say that they did use this opportunity because now that we have the killer, to talk about his backstory, which includes two other
and that's the interesting
violent
bits.
crimes.
So to me,
that brings it in. Yeah,
his last trial was not nearly as interesting as the other crimes that he committed and the other times he was, in legal peril. Which it's amazing that he was even allowed to be out to commit these murders. Like the failure to catch him earlier, to me, is the most interesting part of this story. And
I was surprised, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised, that the gay panic defense is still applicable in more than half the states.
It's legal here.
Here.
Yeah.
I know. It's disgusting.
I just, the other person I was kind of struck by was his friend, that woman who talked about him a little bit. And that just seemed a little heartbreaking. Like, she doesn't fight the conclusion that's drawn, right? She's just like, yeah, he did it and he's got to, face the consequences for what he did. Although she doesn't seem like she ever saw that side of him, right? She's just kind of taking that as, the evidence is there. He clearly did it, but it's not the person I saw. I thought she was kind of an interesting voice that you don't necessarily see. Like usually people are either digging their heels in and trying to proclaim somebody's innocent or sort of totally throwing under the bus. And she's, you can kind of see, she's heartbroken basically that this person who she loved turns out to be a killer.
It surprises me, honestly, that he's not better known in many ways. And I think it's because of who the victims are, because he is a very unusual person in that he was so he was really two people, which many killers are not. Like Rex Hoyerman we're seeing was not really two people, monster by day, monster by night. This guy was very competent by day, really well liked, but really respected by day, and then was, it's really not surprising and surprising that this case isn't better known.
Do you ever meet someone who seems kind of off? Whether it's a creepy neighbor or random phone number that keeps calling you, Truthfinder has you covered. You can search for people by name, address, phone number, email, and more. Truthfinder can be especially helpful for running confidential background checks on anyone you're planning to meet from online dating apps. Go to truthfinder.com/podcasts for a special offer. That's truthfinder.com/podcasts to access your special offer today.
Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Well, shopping for a car?
Yep, Carvana made financing a car as smooth as can be.
Oh, yeah?
I got pre-qualified instantly and had real terms personalized just for me.
Doesn't get much smoother than that.
Well, I got to browse thousands of car options on Carvana, all within my budget.
Doesn't get much smoother than that.
It does. I actually wanted a car that seemed out of my range, but I was able to add a cosigner and found my dream car.
It doesn't get much...
Oh, it gets smoother. It's getting delivered tomorrow.
Visit Carvana.com or download the app to get pre-qualified today.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out the HBO original Last Call? Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Last Call?
So I'm going to give this a thumbs up. This is definitely, a straightforward true crime documentary in many ways. But what I like about it that sort of sets it apart for me is the emphasis on the victims in this case, as told through their family and friends. The victims in this case, gay men in New York City, at a time period when there was extreme homophobia, when even the police were saying, like, what the emphasis on all the gay part, and told in a very compassionate, comprehensive, and sensitive way. It was 4 episodes. I think that was just enough time to tell this story. Only the last episode is devoted to the killer in this case. And that was interesting as well. But, I think this is a really interesting story, and it's interesting to see how something that was originally reported in nonfiction narrative book format is converted into, television documentary format. But I thought it was really interesting, and I really liked it.
Toby Ball.
Yeah, I think we'll probably all say something along these same lines, is that, people talk a lot about sort of victim-centered shows, true crime shows or whatever. This one, I think, does it right. There's not a whole lot of, he lit up the room whenever he walked in kind of stuff. It's like these very, sort of nuanced portraits of the victims, who are gay men living in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And I think it's just, it's poignant, but not in a way that is sort of saccharine or nostalgic or any of that kind of thing. And I think the history part they have about the gay community during that time is also extremely interesting. I was just fascinated by the community organizing that goes around when the community realizes that they can't rely on the police or sort of the typical sort of municipal forces for protection, that they organize their community to protect each other. So that I thought that was very interesting. It's a high quality show. I strongly recommend it. I also think if you are sort of intrigued by it and you want to learn more, Elon's book, which is also called Last Call, is really good. I mean, there's obviously a lot of overlap, but it's a book, so he goes into more detail about some of the stuff and has some slightly different insights. So yeah, big thumbs up.
Kevin Flynn, thumbs up or thumbs down for Last Call?
I'm a thumbs up. I like the way that this was put together. In addition to the crimes, I appreciated the other historical and cultural context that they brought to it. Sometimes they do this in documentaries and it feels like it's shoehorned in, but I think it was very important to do so, and they did it in a really great way. The way that educated and enlightened, as well as propelled the rest of the narrative along. I think there's a lot of younger people that might be surprised at what the conditions were like to be a gay man or woman in the late 80s or 1990s. There's been progress, but there also been setbacks, and I think it's always important to kind of like remind everybody about how far we've come and how far we still need to go. But even still, that's not really the focus of the series. It's a crime series that's just informed by all this really great information. Again, I feel like it really peters out at the end when we get to the trial, because all the good stuff has happened in the story narratively. But, it gets across the finish line. I'm a thumbs up.
Yeah, I'm a thumbs up for this too. I like the book better. I will just throw that out there. The book is just so freaking good, and it is just really hard to live up to. And I don't think the series added anything. If you've read the book, I'm not sure the series adds much, except you do get to meet some of the people that you see in the book, that you read about in the book, and they are delightful to meet. I will say that. The series, the one thing it does suffer from is this has to be 4 episodes and we have to fill them, which is like phenomenon that we talk about all the time on the show. And there are some passages of it that feel a little bit repetitive and long to me. That being said, there's a lot of really, really great stuff here. I really, really enjoyed most of what I saw. And it's just such an interesting and fascinating case. And there's stuff in here that we need to learn about, that we need to know about. And it's just a deep dive into a really, really interesting part of history in New York, a part of an unknown story in true crime, and something that I think everybody should watch. So yeah, thumbs up for me for Last Call. Now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the Crime of the Week. One person was hurt when the new instructor at a Colorado driving school drove his car right through the wall. Police in Lakewood said 7 people had to dive out of the way when the unidentified employee jumped the curb and plowed through the front window. They say the teacher was in their own car, not one of the instructional vehicles with the warning sign and the backup set of brakes. It was only their second and last day on the job. The cops cited them for a moving violation. It doesn't appear they'll lose their license, but if they do, they know which literal hole-in-the-wall driving school they can attend to get it back. Panel, we feel like maybe the driving school could have done a better job of vetting their new instructors. What foreseeable and highly ironic job-related catastrophe will this person commit next time? Laura Bricker, what do you think?
I'm going to say trying to parallel park and running somebody over.
Tell me about, what do you think foreseeable and highly ironic job-related catastrophe this person will get themselves into next time?
I don't know. If he's going to be a swim instructor, maybe try him out in the deep end.
What do you think, Kevin?
It's going to be a firefighter who burns down the house.
How about a true crime podcaster who commits a murder?
That happens. That happens.
It does? That happens? All right, that's going to do it for us. But before we go, Laura Bricker, I have a question for you. Do we have a cat of the week this week?
Our cat of the week comes from Melissa, and it is 2 kittens. Melissa's oldest daughter was auditioning for a musical theater troupe. While they were there waiting, these 2 strays came up to her youngest daughter. They were starving and looked pretty rough. The black cat had blistered paws and frizzy whiskers. We couldn't bear to leave them. I know how you feel. And after my girls got attached, they were able to convince my husband, so we took them home. We took them to a vet for an exam. They are estimated 8 weeks old. Since we found them at the theater studio, my girls named them Winnie Foster, based on Winnie Foster from Tuck Everlasting, and Aaron Burr, based on Aaron Burr from Hamilton.
Also from history. I'm just saying. They named their cat after a guy who shot a guy. Just saying.
I know,
Biggie?
but that's exciting.
Yeah.
For a true crime
Raymond
podcast.
Burr? Ironsides?
Well, it's Aaron Burr.
Aaron Burr. Remember that commercial?
Aaron Burr, sir.
Yes.
That depends. Who's asking? Oh, sure, sir.
Aaron
I'm
Burr.
Alexander
All right,
Hamilton.
no. We don't do that here. We don't do that here. We don't recite Hamilton on the show. That is not a thing.
Yeah, throw away your shot,
That
Laura.
is not a thing we do on this particular podcast. Laura Bricker, if folks want to follow you on social media and do that with you there, how can they find you online?
So if you want to come, because that's the only song that I can do that on Hamilton, because for some reason it always pops up in my car as the first song on my on my music thing. You can tweet at me at Laura
Your music thing, is that like a radio or what is a music thing?
Yeah, no, on my when I go onto my Apple CarPlay and I have my music, For some reason, that song always pops up. So literally, I hear it in my head.
Mine's
when I'm
Dancing
sleeping.
Queen by ABBA because ABBA starts with A-B. Toby Ball, where can folks find you online?
You want to hear what comes up first on my playlist? You can find me at TobyBallNH.
What about you, Kevin? How can you be found?
I'm young, scrappy, and hungry at Kevin P. Flynn.
God, stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. Y'all know that I love Hamilton. What I don't love is people who quote Hamilton. I just don't love that. If you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you can find me at Reb Lavoie.
What's your name? What's your name?
Oh my God. You can also follow the show on Twitter.
Alexander Hamilton.
I'm dying. At Crime
I'm
Raiders
cooperating,
on.
Rebecca.
Can you just,
I'm cooperating.
Can you just mute that? You can also follow the show on Twitter at Crime Raiders On, and I encourage you to join the incredible community in our official Crime Raiders On Facebook discussion group. We also have a regular old Facebook page, by the way. Get episodes early and ad-free at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. You'll also get the Crime Raiders On After Show, Married with Podcast, Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast, and Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. I'm going to do Les Mis next time, you motherfuckers. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our line editor is the wonderful Livy Burdett. The executive producer of this fine program is Kevin Flynn. This show was recorded in the Treehouse Yoga Studio above the Mockingbird Cafe in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, the closet, in our New Hampshire basement where we also rehearse our show-stopping piano bar numbers.
It's the room where it happens. The room where it happens.
No! On behalf of all the Crime Writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
Later.
Are you sure your thing's recording, though?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay.
I stopped doing what I was doing to make sure that it was all.
Okay, good. Go ahead, Kevin, you can start.
And go.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and
Okay,
this...
can you hold it? Wait. Okay, now you can go.
That was really funny. I loved it.
Partners in Crime Media.
Why pick one city, one beach, one restaurant, or even one view? With Celebrity Cruises, you can have it all. Explore the best of Europe, the Caribbean, and Alaska with the best premium cruise line. And now get 75% off your second guest, plus bonus savings on select dates with Celebrity Cruises semi-annual sale. Visit Celebrity.com, call 1-800-CELEBRITY, or contact your travel advisor. Offer applies to non-refundable fares and select sailing. Savings vary by stateroom category. Other terms apply. Visit Celebrity.com for details. Ships Registry, Malta.